Alright then, so let's debate based on the topic that I've given to you. Um, Between granulocyte and macrophage, which one do you think that is better in terms of defensive mechanisms? Well, I stand for macrophage since it is very good in terms of defense and mechanisms, because it acts as antigen presenting cells.
You bring up a strong point about macrophages as antigen presenting cells. That bridge to adaptive immunity is definitely a powerful defensive mechanism. However, I'll argue that granulocytes are fundamentally superior because they're the very first responders. If they didn't immediately mobilize, release signaling molecules, and promote inflammation to start fighting the infection, the macrophages wouldn't have the time or direction to get there. Plus, they're the most abundant, providing that initial numerical force. What do you say to that?
Well, it is abundant, and also they are so-called first responders. But uh, maybe macrophage can do better because it takes time, right? So maybe it can do its job like very thoroughly.
That's fair. Patience can be a virtue in defense. By taking the time to properly process and present antigens, you could argue that macrophages are launching a more effective long term defense by preparing the entire immune system. But I'll counter that without the immediate damage control and containment provided by the granulocytes, the infection might spread too fast for that thorough process to even matter. So, is the speed and initial force of response what matters most, or the long term preparedness?
Well, in terms of curing to holding the disease from spreading, I think long term is the best rather than being the first responders.
I can see your point there. Preventing further spread and achieving a total cure is definitely the ultimate goal. And the long term, thorough setup provided by macrophages does seem crucial for that. However, I'd argue that without the immediate blockade, the long term defense might be overwhelmed before it's even ready. It's like building a fortress while the enemy is already inside the gates. Does that make sense, or do you still prioritize that later stage?
It's like building a fortress with the enemy is already inside the gates. Well, I think that is a good point. Well, does that mean that is it possible that macrophage comes first rather than granulocytes?
Based on what the document says, granulocytes are consistently described as the first to arrive, and the most abundant early on. Macrophages are explicitly noted as coming later. So while every situation is different, the typical pattern is granulocytes first. Are you thinking of a specific scenario where maybe the macrophages would be prioritized, like in a tissue where they are already resident?
Why don't you give me an example then? Gemini, why don't you give me an example?
Certainly. Imagine a fish gets a small cut on its skin that lets some bacteria in. The damaged tissue releases chemicals, and the first cells to detect these signals and migrate quickly are the granulocytes. They begin phagocytosing the bacteria right away and release more signals that cause the nearby blood vessels to become more permeable, which helps bring more fluid and more cells to the site. Only later do the macrophages, with their stronger phagocytic ability, arrive to help clean up the remaining pathogens and start the next phase of defense. Does that make sense for how the sequence plays out?
Yes, that does make sense. So does that mean that being the frontliner, being the first responders, is better than macrophage?
Well, I wouldn't say one is necessarily better. They're both completely essential for a healthy immune response. Granulocytes manage the immediate crisis, while macrophages handle the longer term solution and create memory. It's like needing the fire department for the blazing flames and also needing the construction crew to rebuild the building. You can't really say one is more valuable than the other. Do you see it more that way now?
Now I understand. So does that mean that granulocytes being the first responders and macrophage acts as a memory to uh, to to contain the disease? Is that correct? I mean, to contain the pathogens.
That's generally the idea. Granulocytes act fast to contain the pathogens and limit the spread, while macrophages clear the infection more thoroughly and present antigens to lymphocytes. This presentation is what sets up the adaptive response, which creates immunological memory, so the body can recognize and fight the same threat again more effectively. So, does that connection between first response and memory make sense to you?
Yes, it makes sense. Um, I, I think that is all from me. Thank you.
You're very welcome. I enjoyed discussing that with you. If you have any other questions about fish immunology or anything else at all, just let me know.